Okay, we should be recording. Okay. Welcome to, what's the panel name? Right. Welcome to writing expressive furry and animal body language without losing your reader. And I'm Daniel Potter. I'm the author of 10 books. Most notable among the furry community for Freelance Familiars, which is a comedy urban fantasy about a mountain lion and a squirrel who throws a lot of bombs. I am joined by Kel Gold. Did I pronounce that right?
Kyle Gold.
Yeah.
Hi, I am also the author of several books that have animal and furry characters that express themselves in various ways. So I have a lot of experience in this topic, hopefully.
Yes. Lots. As with all good panels, we're not going to we have an agenda, and once I scroll to that agenda, one moment. Pass the cookies. And so we'll start off with just asking the both of us, and Kyle will go first, I think, to mimic real conversation. Why do you write non-human or furry characters in the first place?
So this is a question that I think every furry author gets a lot, and I have a two-part answer to it. The first part is I like writing furry characters because you can create and talk about character traits and personalities and social constructs and classes and stuff without putting a lot of the baggage that we have as humans into the story. That we can create stereotypes that aren't specific to people who are going to be reading the story, and then address the way people react to them in the world and so on. So that's kind of the literary justification for it. But the reality is that I had to go out and find the literary justification because I really like the animal aesthetic. I like writing animal characters. They're fun to me. I would actually ask people, why do you not write furry and animal characters? So that's my answer to it. How about you?
So I don't write, none of my fiction under Daniel Potter is strictly furry. It's always a combination. I love writing furry or feral and those sort of characters, but I always really love doing it with humans or human-like characters. Like I don't generally do use furriness as like metaphors for race or something. I like looking at a character. Okay, this character is four-legged. How do they interact with the world, despite not having thumbs? And how does that change their perspective by being different? Obviously Freelance Familiars, we're all taught, most of the animal characters are familiars, so they have a tie to a human, and their relationship between that is important. The other thing is I just really like writing animal characters. I have in my Horned Serpent series, I have a giant jumping spider named Blinky. And he's just fun because he's a giant cute spider.
I don't think I've ever written a spider character. I think my partners would kick me out of the house if I did that.
Why? Because you make them read it all?
Well, no, just I would tell them about the spider character and that would be it. I'm I'm the
Oh,
one who gets rid of the spiders in our house. So
oh, I get you. I get you. And of course, you would need art of this character, right?
of course, yes. But that's cool. It's
Yeah.
like definitely the world building around furry characters and animal characters is a fun aspect of it. Even if there's no humans in the world, you're going to have, for example, foxes are going to have a different set of needs for furniture and clothing and just living than an elephant will.
Right. Right. I
Even
mean,
even if they're not the kind of Zootopia,
right.
foxes and elephants, if they're all kind of
The same size.
similar human size, they still have all these different needs because elephants have thick skin and foxes have fur and so on.
I'm a biologist by training, so that's just a deep well that I just, furry worlds, and it's just like, whoop.
Yep.
How does that work?
Yeah, me too. I also have that background. So
Yeah.
it's a lot of fun to explore things, especially when you take stuff that you learn from the animal world, like, hey, armadillos always have litters of identical quadruplets.
I did not
And
know
so,
that.
yeah, they just something in the way like the eggs split twice and then form embryos. And so that's now a thing in my world too. Armadillos always have identical quadruplets in my world.
Do you have
Because
platypuses? Do they glow in the dark now?
I have never explored that, but they might.
Or there's like like a flying squirrel now that under ultraviolet glows pink.
Wow. I think I saw that.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
very cool.
yeah.
It's very cool. So much out there that like that we don't even know about, but
Right, right. Uh, so the next question is, we kind of answered this, but we'll go into it again. What sort of non-human characters do you write?
so mostly mine will be furry characters. So anthropomorphic animals that stand on 2 feet. Um, Normally I think of my characters as plantigrade rather than digitigrade, but I don't always specify that. So, whatever people want to imagine they can. Um, but usually the characters are anthropomorphic, humanoid, um, most often foxes, to be honest.
Gee, do we have a species bias here?
Oh yeah, absolutely. Um, I don't know how to be more specific than that. I have written non-anthro characters, but I think only in short stories. I don't think I've ever done a longer work with them. But yeah, so that's me. And you've said you write generally non-anthro characters, but do you have any anthro ones as well in the mix?
um, so my next book is a werewolf book, and so I've been
Okay.
exploring that. And so the first one of that, called Emergency Shift, um, I've is a character who goes back and will be going back and forth a lot, and has the big hulking werewolf form. But mostly I guess, especially in freelance familiars, they're all feral. They're all talking animals by the most classic definitions. um I do, in 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 Horned Serpent, all the dragons are varying levels of intelligence. So if they're under 200 years, they're kind of like toddlers. If they get over 300, they're brighter. You have a bunch of toddlers who can fly through ships and that sort of stuff. It's good fun. Um, yeah, those are what I've written so far, and of course, under some other names, I have straight anthros. So I do it all.
Okay.
I experiment. I haven't written anything that's like super alien yet. Like, sci-fi, completely different, evolved race or anything with a very different sort of sentence. I haven't tried that yet. I'm sure that that's on the bucket list sometime to cross sometime.
Yeah, same with me. I found that I always thought that I liked science fiction and fantasy equally, or maybe science fiction a little bit more because I was an engineer in college and so on. And then the more I thought about it, the more I would realize that, all the books that I actually really, really like are fantasy books. And most of what I write is fantasy. And I mean, that's not to say there aren't really good science fiction books. And if people want something with really interesting aspects of non-human sentience and language, then Eleanor Arneson's Ring of Swords explores that really well. And that's science fiction straight up. So, but I do lean more towards fantasy.
Yeah. I mean, I write fantasy pretty much because I had a science job and I got in the door and I'm like, I'm going to put that over there. And we're going to go write about magic and stuff.
I think I got intimidated because the most scientific, like, I didn't really have a science degree. I had an engineering degree, which is more practical applications. And then the science degree that I got was in zoology, which is a soft science. And so I guess I could do something like, what if, somebody wrote.
You got a engineering degree and then you went back for zoology?
I got my master's in zoology, yeah.
So you had the engineering undergraduate and then you went to zoology.
Yep.
That is a switch. Were you making like prosthetics for injured animals or something?
No, I did an internship for my engineering degree over a summer, and it was fine, but it was dull. And I started taking some biology electives and then decided that I didn't want to get an engineering job. Like, this is off topic, but I'll make it quick. I interviewed for an engineering job. This was in like the early 90s, I guess it would be, or maybe very late 80s, but I think it was around 1990, I guess, when I was coming out with this engineering degree. And I interviewed at this engineering firm that I swear to God was stuck in the 1950s. They had the like white linoleum floor with the occasional green square and yellow square here and there. Everybody there was a 50-plus white man with a crew cut and a short sleeve collared shirt and a tie and a pocket protector and glasses. And I was so uninterested in the interview. Even when I sat down to do the interview, they were asking me questions and I was like, I don't know. And then he would like feed me the answers and be like, well, what if you did this with it? And I was like, oh yeah, that would work with that. And I guess you could then do that. And he was like, right. And then how about this? And I'm like, yeah, sure, whatever. And then for some reason they called and wanted me back. And I was just like, nope. So yeah, I thought biology would be more interesting.
Yeah.
I took a couple years off and worked at the university so that I got free tuition for a class here and there. I took some more biology classes and then applied for a master's in zoology and got in.
Cool.
So yeah,
I love it.
But yeah, so I never felt like I feel like if I was going to write science fiction, it would be in the zoology sphere. And I guess like having anthropomorphic animal characters and what would the world be like with furry characters is kind of my science fiction thing, I guess. I don't know.
Right.
So that's where that came from.
Yeah. I like. I find I really gravitate to fantasy, but I'm very picky about some things. I don't like. Um, there are a few epic fantasies I really enjoy. When fate really gets out of hand, and you can see really the hand of the author, like, oh, we need this to happen now, and because it's fated and that sort of stuff, and grand destinies and farm boys with swords, and really the black and whiteness of a lot of those worlds. That's not where I want to go. I really like grayness, but on the other hand, I don't tolerate grimdark well. So
Yeah, I'm reading a fantasy series right now, and I'm not going to name it
yeah,
necessarily, but it's good. It's really well written. The characters are fantastic. It's just like everybody is terrible right now. They're either terrible or they're at the mercy of someone terrible. And so even as I'm in the series and thinking like, man, I hope something good comes out of this, my brain's going like, it's not. It's not.
There's no.
You got to wait till like maybe the last half or the last third of the last book of the series, and then maybe something will be redeemed out of it. But you're in the second book right now, and I know too much about structure. I'm like, this is the part where
tastes great.
Yeah, this is the part where everything goes bad. So like, don't even get hopeful about it. But yeah, that's the problem with epics is like I can deal with that in a novel length book where like I know we start out hopeful, things get bad, a little bit more hope, things get worse, but
Right.
it's going to be over soon. And then one way or another, you pick up. But if you're reading like a multi-book series and you're in the second book, just like nothing good is going to happen in the second book ever. It's just you're in for a whole book full of misery. So, but I'm enjoying it. I should say it's well done.
Right.
But I just have this like that feeling that you're talking about. It's just like, yeah, all right, let's get through it.
Yeah. I suppose we should meander back on topic here.
Sure.
Yeah. So this is where we're going with this. We have a lot of non-human characters, and where are the next side of you fairly consistently write furry characters. So when those characters show emotion, what parts of their body and body language are you focusing on?
For me, it's eyes are always part of it. That's not unique to furry, but it's always there. People raise eyebrows or narrow their eyes or whatever. For furry characters specifically, it's mostly ears and tail, sometimes whiskers, sometimes the fur itself, like the hackles. Like hackles will go up for some of them, but largely it's ears and tail. Because as you observe animals in the wild or in the home, for those of us who have pets, that's where a lot of their expression comes from. They also have, it's more difficult with humanoid furry characters, but animals also have a lot of expression with body language. So like the way they sit, if they sit back or if they sit forward. But I find focusing on the ears and tail is simpler, and it serves to remind the reader that these are furry characters, because these are parts that humans don't have that are expressive in ways that humans aren't. And it's interesting too, in when I write human characters, I don't catch myself doing things like, oh, their ears flicked forward, because
wait.
in my head they're human. And so, and I automatically shift gears so that I don't run into that with humans, which was interesting to me because I thought I would, because I'd been writing furry characters for so long. When I finally settled into something that had a lot of humans in it,
Or are you
I was like,
working on
am I going to
something
have to catch myself? But they felt different.
Oh yeah.
And so as I was writing them, I was like, oh no, they can turn red. Furries can't, like, you can't do like blushing or turning red from
Find some
anger
artists depictions.
oh yeah, I mean, if I were writing a book that took place in an anime world, they would get
Oh, yeah.
little blushy circles under their eyes and like little sweat drops and things, but I'm trying to be kind of realistic. Um, and sometimes whiskers, because the whiskers do move around. Like
I
when you
can't say I've
smile,
really done
the
much
whiskers
with
go
the
up.
whiskers myself. I hadn't really thought of that.
And yes, go ahead.
Yeah. I mean, for me, okay, so you write generally about cats. I've got, foxes. My main character is a cat, and he's working. If you look at my books, I don't have that many dogs, and if there are they're fairly minor roles. Ear position is definitely key. We do, most of your books are third person, right?
It's a mix. They have first person. I'm maybe write first person more commonly, or it's split 50-50, first or tight third. I don't do omniscient third because
it gets confusing.
I can't figure it out really. I always want to be in a character's head. So it's either tight third or first.
Right. Freelance Familiars is always from Thomas's perspective, the mountain lion. I have some extra stories from Rudy's, but he's a cat, and so often when I'm looking at his, we're describing what his body does in response to something, and it's very definitely, the ears are the best indicator for anything with movable ears. And I'm a little guilty because they don't always mean quite the same thing, species to species. But generally, if your ears are back, it's things that you're not happy.
Right.
They do, and Thomas does. I use the tail a lot. The bushiness, the hackles. Blinky was very interesting, and so he couldn't talk, so he did a lot of wave blinking when he was trying to focus on something, and sort of like clicking. Sort of he had argumentative clicks, and his entire body would just like go up and down and bounce and that sort of stuff. So with very alien body types like Blinky, you can kind of just make things obvious by using their entire body. And the dragons actually would, the big dragon would mimic human emotion, so you could see just a little bit of a smile. My animals can actually have a spell on them which allows them to mimic human expression, so that's kind of a shortcut.
That makes things easier.
Right. So
do you ever do things like with your dragons where they change color for emotion or expression?
I have not. That would have been a brilliant idea, but my dragons are essentially very large metal elementals. Like
Okay.
big bad in horn serpent is basically a flying brick of iron, black iron. So yeah, color change wouldn't have worked for that one, but if I ever work an octopus or a cuttlefish into freelance, we would definitely do some of that.
I like that idea. There's some books that I've read that have that where like the different colors of the scales will change depending on what your emotions are. Um, it's it's actually for the last 5 years, and then at various points in my life, I've been around dogs. So we've had a dog in the house for the last 5 years, and it's really it feels like for him he doesn't use his tail for expression so much.
Oh, really?
Um,
So do your
he
characters follow suit and don't wag?
no, they wag. He was a rescue, so we don't know what habits he learned. He wags his tail in like two very specific circumstances. One is when he sees another dog because he gets agitated and he's reactive to other dogs, and then the tail wag is just excitement in that regard. The other one is when we're we've told him that there's food somewhere and he's sniffing around trying to find it, and he's all excited in the search for food, and then his tail will wag a bit. But mostly he's expressive with his ears, and you can just watch his ears, like when he's eaten and we've all eaten and we're just sitting around and he's like, I'm just waiting to see what happens next. His ears are like up but out.
Uh-huh.
And then if we start to get up and he thinks there's more food, the ears will go like up. And his face is totally different in those two positions.
Right.
And then if you approach him to pet him, then his ears go back to like let your hand go over the ears, and his face looks completely different again.
Oh.
And it's been really interesting watching that. For foxes, I would recommend that people go look up the YouTube channel Save a Fox, which is run by a woman who has a fox rescue, and she posts videos pretty much every day of her going out and interacting with her foxes. And so you can see them like running around, they wag their tails, they like put their ears back and up, and you can get all kinds of expressions if you want to study semi-wild foxes.
There's less of those about cougars, but
I'm sure there are cougar rescues out there somewhere.
Well, there's one Russian one named Messi who is very, very domesticated and tame, and he is fun to watch. But
cool.
They're basically giant house cats when they're tamed. Like this guy's pretty big.
And if you have a cat around the house, that gives you a lot of base for writing cougars, I would imagine.
Yes, this is Einstein. He's an old man. He's 14.
Ours is old too. not quite that old, but
yeah. Yeah, and what I'm doing with the werewolf books is I'm doing a lot more scent, that sort of stuff. So in a furry world, how much do you use scent? Do you explore that, or do you put them more into human limits?
I definitely use scent a lot in the furry world. One of the staples of my contemporary furry world is they have a product called Nutrascent, which kind of neutralizes the air. So like airlines use it a lot. But the way I imagine it, and I think I've described it in a couple places, it has a little, I don't know if you're familiar with like when there's ozone in the air, you get a little like tickle in the air. It's not a smell, but it's like the lack of a smell, and it's a weird thing. So my headspace is the Nutricent gives you that just weird little like, oh, there's not a smell, but I can tell that there was Nutricent here because smells have been removed, and there's this weird like not smell.
Useful for murder mysteries and that sort of stuff. Oh, the smell has been neutralized.
But yeah, people in my books have been like going to answer a door and then they know who's on the other side because they catch their scent, or knowing that someone has been in a room. Getting one of the early books was talking about the designs of churches, where churches were designed with a large open space so that everyone's scent didn't get stuffy and confining, but everyone could be present, but also like you would have
so they're not
enough
just like
air and enough room.
Oh, Mildred's here.
Yeah. And you could do it the other way too. You could have churches that are with very low ceilings, so that you know when your whole community is there and you can tell who's not there.
Right.
But yeah, I use scent a lot.
Mm. Cool.
And I'm trying to think if there's any other I've gone back and forth in some of these about using like night vision, because there's definitely and nocturnal diurnal animals. So like in cities with mixed species, I've never really like demarcated it where it's like, oh, raccoons and opossums and foxes and skunks are all take night shift jobs, and then the cougars and tigers and wolves and bears all take day shift jobs. But there's definitely areas. I think in one of my books I had a place where like the neighborhood voted to take out the streetlights because they were all nocturnal species and they wanted to discourage other people from coming through their neighborhood. They're like, we can get around fine at night. We don't need other people coming in. So little things like that.
Interesting. Very cool. Very cool.
How does scent or other things play a role with your familiars?
I use it a lot for. I don't use it as much as I probably could. I did make a joke that foxes were very stinky in the latest book.
They are.
we have there's a new character in Pridefall where there is this fox Magus, and they were staying in they were using Thomas's and O'Mara's study for a while, and O'Mara nearly gagged herself to death. So Thomas just like, oh, it smells like fox. It's just foxes smell.
I've had hotels that charged a surcharge for foxes and skunks and weasels and other mustelids, because they had to get the scent out of the sheets after they had checked out.
Oh, do you have you had one of those animals, or?
I've been so I've helped at a fox rescue.
Oh, okay.
And I've helped at general wildlife rescue also. So we've been around them. We have actually skunks that live in the park around us here.
Right.
And we can definitely smell them.
Oh yeah. Yeah. Yeah, we're okay. So they use scent pretty rarely, usually when it's funny. Or, well, I use it more for the communication of territory and that sort of thing. Like, and really it generally only works that way if we're dealing with cats. So there's a bit of scent talk when Thomas is seeing his girlfriend who's a lion, and that sort of thing. In the werewolf book,
do they pee on places to mark it with their scent if it's a territory thing?
He uses because I don't want to gross anyone out. He doesn't mention that and just uses his cheek glands if he's marking something.
Okay, fair.
He was a former
compromise.
human, so he does have some reservations about that. The werewolf book definitely does mark stuff.
All right. Full on.
So, but I'm using scent in that case where she's using it to detect the emotional states of the humans around her. And so that acts more as a superpower right now because she's the only werewolf right now after the first book. So, but she's new at it, and so she doesn't quite identify everything correctly.
So interestingly, I kind of wanted to touch on this too, because I remembered that your cougar character was a human and then got changed into a cougar. So I imagine that made it easy for you to kind of introduce the reader to all of the things that an animal's going to do and how a human would perceive them, or how human reactions are translated into animal.
Well, yeah.
I'm sneaking up on the next question this way,
right.
But that's always helpful when you have someone who's like, hey, I'm in this animal body, but I'm a human,
right.
And so I need to map my emotions onto what my animal body is doing, which allows me to explain it to you, the reader.
Right. It was like in the first book there was a lot of like, not quite sure what I'm doing here, but the body took the emotions he did and mapped it pretty well. He didn't have a lot of like difficulty fitting into the body. It did take him a book before he said, okay, I'll lick my feet. the instincts, he fought the instincts for a little while and then kind of settled into the body and the identity of being a cougar. Like, the first book he's like, I have to get back to human. By the second book, it'd be nice if I had to get back to human. By the third, he's like, I'm okay. He got his magic thumbs, so
that's a big help.
He has a low-level telekinesis, which allows him to manipulate smaller objects, although it's not as good as thumbs. So, but he sort of settled into his life as a cat. But so but that does segue into our last question here, which is, how do you teach the reader the languages of your character's expressions?
This is a tough one, and I've definitely had people in the past, especially non-furries. Furries are pretty conversant. If they say, lay his ears back, or wagged his tail or curled his tail around him, people generally understand the emotions associated with that. But I've had non-furries say, I don't know how I was supposed to interpret that thing that was happening with his ears.
Right.
And so I try to always associate it with the emotion as it's happening. I try not to just, at least early on, I try not to have the actions happen in isolation. I try to be like, Kip felt his ears get warm and laid them back or something. Like
Ooh, I like
when your ear, because your ears can get warm, they just won't show. They won't show warm. So, or like someone yells at him and then he puts his ears back, or he's like, "Oh, that's interesting," and then he perks his ears up. And so early on, I always try to make sure that I'm making the emotion a little more explicit, and then adding the ear or tail movement to it, so that later in the book, hopefully, the reader has made that unconscious association, and I can just use the ear and tail movement as a shortcut. One of my favorite examples of that is not from furries or animals at all, but just the idea of creating an association so that the reader like associates something with another thing. Comes from the Shining, the book, where the main character Jack Torrance is like, so he has a thing where whenever he explains early on, like, oh, whenever he really wanted a drink, and then he eats an aspirin, and like the sharp, bitter taste of the aspirin drives away the desire to have a drink. And so you get to a point where later on he just eats an aspirin, and you're like, oh, I know what that means, because he explained it early on and then kind of reinforced it a couple times, and then he can just say he ate an aspirin instead of saying, oh, he was stressed and wanted to retreat into the comfort of alcohol, so he blah blah, and then like eventually he stops crunching the aspirin, and you also know that that's trouble. So it's there's neat tricks that you can use where you kind of put things together a lot early on, and then you can untether them, as it were. And so I try to do that. I don't think I'm as successful as Stephen King, but practice.
Yeah. I was just going to say I cheat. I cheat all the time. And I don't really, at least consciously, try and wean the reader off of cheating. I have, for example, there's a scene in the last Freelance Familiar book where I am just literally focused on his tail. He's like, my tail, which had been doing slow, happy lashes, stopped dead as dread ran its cold, clammy hands down my spine. All my problems?
It's also fun, especially with tails, to imply that they are trying to express an emotion, and it's not necessarily under the character's control, because that happens with humans. There are things we control, like I'll smile, but if I'm stressed or embarrassed and I get warm and I flush, I can't control that.
Right.
And so sometimes they're like, I made an effort to keep my ears upright means I'm annoyed, but I don't want to show it.
Oh,
or things like, yeah.
Thomas is constantly fighting not to keep his claws sheathed quite often. There's a gesture I actually stole from Jim Butcher's Aeronaut, he I forget the title of it. So Naughtlus's Wit Aeronaut or something. But he did this great steampunk novel, which I don't think it did well enough for him to continue, unfortunately. I really liked it. But he has Setnit cats, and he does some really great expressions about the cats. And one is when they're trying to be diplomatic, is they will curl their tail across their paws and hide their claws. And Thomas does this a lot when he's trying to be diplomatic. And so that's sort of a combo expression that you can use.
It's a very evocative one. Like I can see it right now, and I'm like, yep, I know what that is. I'm trying to think of what else. I do mix in, as I said, I talk about like raising eyebrows because animals still do have.
Furries have eyebrows.
they have eye ridges at least,
right.
And I haven't. I mean, dogs have like, or foxes, dogs and foxes have like the vibrissae up on top of the eyes.
Mm-hmm.
There's so many whiskers all over.
Oh yeah. Einstein, do you want to show us the whiskers? No.
I am working on a story that has a transformation in it. So a human that finds himself in an animal body.
Oh yeah.
And so there's a short scene of like, again, the body figures things out. So it's not like, how do I run with 4 legs? Oh my God, I have to relearn this. It's like, no, the body figures it out because otherwise there's a whole lot of tedium in the story. But there's also scenes where he's figuring out how to use his new senses, and where it's like, man, I can't see as well, but I can't see distance, but I can see better in the dark, especially when things are moving.
Right.
And my whiskers like tell me stuff about the air around me, and so I get to do that same thing of like educating the reader as the character is learning.
Yeah. The other thing is like, I also try and make sure they do motions that humans can't quite or would never really do. Like Rudy scratched himself while he thought,
Mm-hmm.
And you can see, and immediately when you do that, you can see a squirrel doing that while he's thinking and that sort of thing.
Do you study squirrels in order to get good movements down for him?
Maybe a little. I mean, I watch people send me all sorts of squirrels. It's not like I've made a study of it, but you live in America and you like squirrels, and there's a lot of squirrel content on YouTube and that sort of stuff. But I watched a whole guy who made a huge squirrel obstacle course in his yard during the pandemic. And he did slow-mo to see how they're tracking when they get flung and that sort of thing.
Wow. See, it's cool. People are like, their creativity is coming out in some cases when you're stuck indoors for a year.
Well, this guy was a professional YouTuber anyway, so.
I mean, still, I guess, you've got to figure out what to do to keep yourself entertained.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Some people can't just sit at a desk 12 hours a day and write, right?
Yep. Alas.
Let's see. I think we've got another 9 minutes. This would really be
that's about what I got.
If it was a normal thing. But do you have any additional tricks or comments? I mean, my basic thing is, I always kind of just, if there's any doubt, I always supply the emotion. Sometimes I don't even if it's just like I just, Rudy's tail often sort of does stuff. And I like Rudy's tail waved around like it was a bat looking for a ball or something like that. I use it in a lot of metaphor.
Yeah, I think it's interesting to do. I think you alluded to this a little bit. It's interesting and certainly accurate that different species of animal will have different body language. And that can be a good source of maybe misunderstanding. Although I feel like if you grew up in a society, a multi-species society, you would figure out that, oh, when a cat's tail is lashing, then back off. But if a dog's tail is wagging, then they're excited about something.
Right.
But I would also say, like, don't. I would advise people, because I've seen this happen sometimes. Don't go into too much detail. Don't like feed the reader a glossary of your character's body language or of all the different species body language. Like, let it come out organically in the story.
Right.
And if you're worried that people won't understand what the expression means, then you can always sort of reinforce it with words as a last resort. Like, I don't like saying they felt embarrassed, because it's kind of like, well, you're telling me that, but I'd rather like actually see it and come to that conclusion. But if
Sometimes
you have to be like,
tell.
oh,
they just tell.
Yeah, they felt embarrassed, so they put their ears back, so that next time you can just say they put their ears back, then you can get away with it once or twice. But I think it's like any aspect of world building, it's best revealed through character and not just like fed to the reader as a thing for them to remember and process later. That would be my tip or trick.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah,
How about for you?
My big tip is, if there's any doubt, just kind of have fun with it and work it into just the metaphor. Give a fun way to describe what is happening. And in my case, where I'm dealing with a lot of different species at the same time that have different body languages, sometimes you just got to say what it is. They decisively slapped their tail down and made a big boom.
Yeah. And I would say, like, even if, I mean, this kind of goes along with writing animal characters. So if you don't feel comfortable using it, you don't have to use it a lot, but I would say it should be in there at least a little bit, because you want to remind the reader that these are animals, that they have ears and a tail that do things, or they have whiskers, or they have claws that can come out or not come out. That's part of another question that we get a lot, which is, how do you remind the characters or how do you remind the reader that your character is furry and not just a human in a cat suit?
Don't just have
you have less problem with
pages of dialogue where it's he said he and he said right. Always
right.
Package those with physical actions, and then you're always reminded of who is talking and what is talking.
Right. And that's where this like non-human expressivity really is useful as well as fun.
Yeah. Okay, I hope that was helpful for all of you, and interesting. I think we're about at time now, so I just want to plug some pluggable bowls, and then we'll sign off. And so again, I'm Daniel Potter. I'm going to be around the show floor in the VR chat as Nibs Nod, and I have a booth in the VR world, and Freelance Familiars is on sale throughout the con, and you can pick that up on Amazon. Just search Freelance Familiars at the title. Daniel Potter doesn't work quite as well due to a certain wizard and the actor who played him. So you can also visit my website at danielpotterauthor.com, and I've got a new series coming out called The Full Moon Medic, and check that out soon too. You can get the prelude story for free.
Cool. You can find information about me and my works at kylegold.com, or follow me at Kyle Gold on Twitter, which is where I usually post stuff about what's going on. I have a monthly newsletter that includes excerpts of unpublished work, answers to questions about writing, and upcoming release dates, projects I'm working on, things like that, which you can find. It's probably on my website. It's bit.ly/Kyle Mail, KYELLMAIL. It just comes out once a month. I don't sell the mailing list to anyone else. My most recent books are Dude, Where's My Pack, which came out from Fur Planet in December, and Love Match 3, which came out from Fur Planet in August, I think, of last year. And Writing as Tim Sussman, the last book in the Collation series, came out in January, The Revolution and the Fox. You can find all of those at furplanet.com for print books, or Bad Dog Books for ebooks, as well as many other fine retail establishments.
Cool.
Thank you, Daniel, for inviting me to this panel. This was a lot of fun. I hope people learned something.
And thank you for everyone for watching. Have a great con.
Enjoy.
Thank you so much, Kyle and Daniel, for that wonderful panel. It was super informative. I know I was taking notes. Hopefully you guys learned a lot about that. Nothing's better than two artists talking about their craft. I thoroughly enjoyed that. But we do have a lot of events here still left at Furnal Equinox Virtual. We know it's the last day, but it's far from over. We have panels, social panels, we have gaming panels, we have more panels about like creating comics and stuff, and then we also have our masquerade. So hopefully that you guys enjoy. Next up we have Pixel Life hosted by Entobird, all about pixel biology. So hopefully you guys have a lovely one, enjoy it, and have a great day.
When registration opened, we set a donation target of $6,000 for this weekend, which you beat before the convention had even started. Cue a panicked, bewildered staff trying to figure out what to do next. We quickly added a stretch goal of $8,000, which you also beat before the convention started. A couple of days in advance of the con at the time of recording, that's where we're at, and I wouldn't be surprised if you've beaten even more by the time this goes live. Furnal Equinox 2019 raised $11,000. I think that we can not only beat, but absolutely kick the crap out of that number. I think that we can raise so much that the convention management don't know how to deal with it. I want to raise so much that if we can't break the software that tracks how much has been raised, we can at least break the people who use it. I want to see Scanny cry. Please help me do this and hit the donate button below.